Hey everybody, happy Saturday. Welcome to Recovery Hacks. Now today's episode is going to be a bit of a part two to last week's episode where I talked about the differences in mindset between survivor mentality and victim mentality. And I explored the differences and I just gently invited each of you to take an honest yet compassionate inventory of where you might be at in your own healing journey. And I really encouraged each of you to work towards that survivor mindset because it really is coming from a place of empowerment where you are taking responsibility for your well-being and you are feeling empowered to craft the life that you desire and that you deserve. And you're no longer allowing the trauma from your past to write your future. So today's episode kind of piggybacks on that. And I want to talk about something that is newer to the field of trauma therapy, but I think is very, very profound and something that I find is very helpful for so many of my clients who are working on healing from past trauma. Now, what I want to talk about today is called post-traumatic growth, and I'll tell you a little bit about where it comes from and then how we define it. But before I do that, it's so very important to me that I give a little bit of a disclaimer here, which is as I talk about the positive aspects of post-traumatic growth, please know that this is not said as something to replace the negative and awful aspects of the trauma that you have gone through. Nothing that I'm about to say today is meant to sugarcoat or silver line what you have gone through. It is not to try to slap good on something bad, okay? This conversation is about honoring the messy and complex process of healing, which is very dialectical in nature, meaning two opposing truths that can happen at the same time. So trauma is both awful and an opportunity for beautiful growth. It's not one or the other, it is both. So as I talk about the beautiful opportunity for growth, please remember this is not said to invalidate, minimize, or cover up the negative, yucky aspects of your painful past, okay? All right. So post-traumatic growth. This is a newer phrase that's been added to the world of trauma healing and trauma recovery. And let me go back in time just a little bit. So back in the 70s, I believe it was, the model of healing was developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and it was called the stages of death and dying. And you probably have all heard these 5 stages. They've been around for a long time now. And they were originally applied to a person who was going through the death of a loved one or a person who was themselves dying. And it kind of outlines the 5 key emotional stages that a person goes through. Well, since then, it has been generalized to any kind of emotional process or healing that a person is going through, not just around death or dying, but any kind of loss or change. And certainly trauma brings with it a whole host of feelings around loss and change. It could be loss of childhood, loss of innocence, loss of trust, loss of people, relationships, all kinds of loss tied up in trauma recovery. So for a long time, the world of trauma therapy has leaned on these 5 stages of death and dying to help organize the emotional experience that a person is going through. Now, if you're not familiar with the stages of death and dying, you could do a quick Google search and read more about it. But real quickly, the 5 stages are first, denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and acceptance. So remember the acronym DABSA, D-A-B-S-A. Now, none of you are in denial because you wouldn't be in this community if you were. But then the emotional stages after denial, once you kind of awaken to the reality of your experiences, are going to be anger, bargaining, sadness, and then eventually getting to a peaceful place of acceptance. So for a long time, people kind of thought acceptance is kind of the end result. But more recently, there's been new contributions added to this wonderful model that says, in fact, there seems to be a sixth stage that a lot of people go through. And when I learned about this stage, probably about a year to 2 years ago, I remember being so excited to learn this because I thought, oh my gosh, this opens up like a whole new world for people who are recovering from difficult life experiences. To me, it felt like a breath of fresh air, and my hope was restored that it can get even better than acceptance, right? So that's what I want to share with you today. And this sixth stage is what's referred to as post-traumatic growth. So you've heard of post-traumatic disorder, right? And those are like all of the problems that come about from having gone through a traumatic experience. And to heal from post-traumatic stress, you've got to go through these stages of emotional grief and change, these stages of death and dying, if you will. And now they're saying there's actually a sixth stage to this process of healing from trauma. Okay. So what is post-traumatic growth? Well, it's considered the positive psychological changes that you experience as a result of going through difficult traumatic experiences. So it's the positive that comes from the negative. Now, remember, that does not mean that we are covering up the negative with the positive. It just means that we are acknowledging the fuller experience. Okay. You can hear the dogs outside barking. Someone must be walking by. So there are considered to be 5 domains of post-traumatic growth. So I want to walk you through each of those. And as I'm doing this, I want you to grab a piece of paper or maybe your journal. And I want you to write down each of these domains as I'm saying them and the little description, and then come back to this when the video is done and really kind of flesh out where you feel like you're at in each of these domains. You may find that these are brand new to you. That's totally okay. How exciting. I'm giving you a sneak peek of what's to come should you consider continuing on your healing journey, which I suspect you will. But you may, as you're hearing these, start to notice some of the things that are already happening inside of you relative to your own growth. And hopefully this just gives you that, nudge to keep going, because it's just going to get better and better. Okay. All right. So here are your 5 domains of post-traumatic growth. The first domain is personal strength. All right. Now, when you look back at some of the very challenging, maybe life-threatening events that you have survived, you get to a place after moving through these 5 other stages of emotional processing: the denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and acceptance. You move through those and you start to look back on your history with great appreciation for what you have survived. Okay. Personal strength is about saying, wow, look at what I have been able to survive, to heal from, and to overcome. Look at how strong I am, that I can handle such difficulty. And more importantly, look at how incredibly resourceful I am for finding my way through this extraordinarily difficult path that I was put on. Okay. Now, again, this doesn't mean that you need to feel happy that you went through this because now you're strong. All right. You can still have absolute disdain for the experiences that you've been through and acknowledge how strong you really are for some way, somehow finding your way through these things. Okay. So that's domain number 1, just connecting with the huge amount of personal strength that you have. Okay. All right. Domain number 2 is what we call closer relationships. Now, if you have gone through the other 5 stages of healing and grieving, denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and acceptance, emphasis is going to be on that 4th stage, sadness. Okay. And if you've ever sat with someone who's going through that stage, you know what deep guttural vulnerability that person goes into within themselves and with others to really connect with the profound pain of those traumatic experiences. Okay. This is not kind of more that surface level anger. Anger is very appropriate and a very important part of the healing process. But there's something so deep and guttural about the later stage of sadness, moving into the tremendous grief, the sobbing, the uncontrollable crying, that this pain has really happened. And this actually then becomes the doorway into acceptance. Okay. When you go through that stage and go through that guttural pain, you develop a deep respect and appreciation for vulnerability and for authentic connection with other humans, not the superficial connection of everything's fine. So we're just going to talk about the pretty stuff in life or something as simple as the weather. But we're going to get into the real meat of what it means to be a human. Okay. All the deep layers of the human emotional experience. And so this second domain is all about respecting authenticity and vulnerability in your relationships and connecting with other humans in those deep ways. And as a result, experiencing closer, deeper relationships. Okay. What I find with clients who start to cultivate this domain in their life is not only do they desire and respect closer relationships, but they actually can't really tolerate superficial relationships anymore. They just have like no space in their life for that. They'll tolerate them if they have to, but when it comes to real relationships, like they want to go deep or they're just not interested. And I just think that's such a cool place to get to. Okay, the third domain is what we call greater appreciation for life. Okay, when you go through harrowing experiences, traumatic experiences, especially ones that felt or actually were life-threatening, you come out of it on the other side and you do develop a greater appreciation for being alive and a greater appreciation for this just incredible experience we call life. Most of the time, people who are experiencing this growth, they have a change in their perspective and they experience a change in their priorities. What once used to feel really important no longer feels that important. Okay. And a lot of times, as I was saying with superficiality versus depth in relationships, is kind of the same thing here. It's like the things that used to feel important now feel superficial. Okay. The amount of money in your bank account, the size of your house, the letters after your name, all of the things that we tend to use as kind of a status driven by our ego mind, they kind of fall away in this new stage of growth because we realize that it's actually the little things, it's actually the depths of life that really, really matter. Okay. It's the quiet walk in the park with the best friend. It is the, tasty cup of coffee as you watch the sun rise. It's hearing the birds chirping. It's the little things that actually become the big things. Okay. So, this greater appreciation for life, this shift in perspective and priorities is what we consider to be the third domain of post traumatic growth. The fourth domain is called new possibilities. Okay. And I get so excited when people start to shift into this domain because it really speaks to their growth in moving out of just getting by and just kind of managing life, living from that fight or flight place, living from that white knuckling place and just getting by to actually living and thriving and feeling good in their own life. And when you live from this place, there are new possibilities. You get excited about life now, and you start to see all that you want to do and all that you can do because of your strength, because of these relationships that you're cultivating. Because of these priorities in your life, you now see new possibilities, new ways of getting excited, new ways of feeling deeply connected to your life and to others' lives. You start to see new ways to do things, new ways to live, new opportunities, new possibilities. It's so, so exciting. So when I see people start to get excited about their life, I know that they're moving into this growth stage of new possibilities. The last domain of post-traumatic growth is one of my absolute favorites, and that is spiritual development. Okay. And of course, the word spiritual can mean something different for every single person. For some people, it can be connected to their religion, their personal faith in some kind of higher power. It can also mean for other people a connection to nature. That can be a very spiritual experience for a lot of people, to Mother Earth, to animals, to sunsets, to plants. But it can also be a connection to just kind of your higher self, that version of you that transcends your trauma and transcends your past experiences, and really is a culmination of all of these other domains, a culmination of possibility and deep relationships and beautiful perspective on life, and just a deep adoration and love for yourself and compassion for all that you've gone through. This in and of itself can be a very spiritual experience. And the way that we define this fifth domain of spiritual development is when someone really starts to connect with existential questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? And for a lot of trauma survivors, when they do get into this place, they realize, I shouldn't be here based on what I've been through. For some people, they think, I should have died during that traumatic experience, just based on how it went. Like, how am I even here? For other people, maybe they have survived what we call the dark night of the soul, where suicidality was a very present thought or emotional process for them. And thank God they're here. So for a lot of people, this spiritual development has deep existential roots in, why am I here? Why have I been given a new lease on life? And then that leads into, there must be a reason. There must be a purpose. And I am committed to figuring out what that purpose is and living it out to the fullest. Okay. So it's connecting with your purpose. I like to call connecting with your gifts, and sharing them with the world, making the world a better place just by being you, just by sharing yourself and your heart. That is spiritual development. So it can mean something different for everyone. So these are the 5 incredible domains of what we call post-traumatic growth. Okay. Personal strength, closer relationships, a greater appreciation for life, new possibilities, and spiritual development. Now, as you take all of these in, isn't this so refreshing and exciting? Isn't this like seeing life with new eyes, with feeling hope and feeling just inspired to get out there and do amazing things, even though you've been through incredible difficulty? Okay. So if you're resonating with any of these domains, you, my friend, are starting to experience post-traumatic growth. Okay. This means that you are moving through those other stages. You're processing through the anger of what's happened to you. You're processing through the deep, deep guttural sadness of what's happened to you and what has been lost as a result of that. You are working to really accept that this is a chapter of your story, but you're starting to find growth as a result of those experiences. Okay. If these domains are not resonating with you yet, keyword, this is what you have to look forward to. This is why you keep going. This is why you take personal responsibility for your healing, for your well-being, because this is the beautiful, incredible existential growth that awaits you. I promise. Okay. Now I'm going to revisit my disclaimer because it's so very important. all of this beautiful goodness that I'm talking about is not to cover up or minimize or invalidate the ugliness of what you've been through. That is very real. It deserves a sacred space in your awareness of your complete story. And we will forever honor the ugliness of what you've been through. It never should have happened. But post-traumatic growth says it did happen. And I'm going to transmute that ugliness into something beautiful because that's what I deserve. Okay. I'm going to turn that pain into peaceful power, and I'm going to make something good of it. That's post-traumatic growth. Okay. So I would love to hear in the comments below what's resonating with you. What's giving you hope? What's inspiring you? What about this conversation is landing on you in a rich and meaningful way? I would really love to hear that. I'd love to celebrate that with you. And I would love for all of the members to be able to kind of share and celebrate together. So let us know below. And I really hope you'll take some time to journal on these 5 domains and just kind of notice where they're already showing up in your life or what you're looking forward to showing up in your life soon. Okay. I'm sending you all love. I hope this conversation was helpful, hopeful, most importantly, inspiring. And as you guys know, I'll be back here next Saturday for another episode. Bye-bye.